Are you an undergraduate or postgraduate student? Do you work as an M&E consultant or you are a research practitioner? Do you find research methods such an abstract unit in the course of your study or in the course of your work? And this is because you cannot relate the research theory you learn or you learned in class with practice. Then this channel is for you. I, Dr. Lydia Wabogo, welcomes you to this channel, which is a class on research methods. In this class, we discuss everything social science research, from understanding the research discipline, research philosophy, elements of scientific research, and the methodologies of conducting research. Welcome to this channel as we explore this discipline called research. Welcome to our today's lesson, where we shall start our discussion on administration of questionnaires as the first method of data collection that we are going to discuss. In our previous lesson, we have introduced methods of data collection by explaining the meaning of data, types of data, sources of data, and factors to be considered when determining methods of data collection. So we shall move together in this first lesson to talk about administration of questionnaires as a method of data collection. Someone may be asking, why are we talking about administration of questionnaires? Because questionnaire is a tool. That is the device that is used to collect data, whereas administration of questionnaires is the technique. The learning outcomes of this lesson is that at the end of it, you should be able to define a questionnaire, discuss the factors that determine the success of a questionnaire, identify the type of information that a questionnaire should seek, state the designs of constructing a questionnaire, and explain the rules that are followed when constructing a questionnaire. So we start with our first outcome. What is a questionnaire? A questionnaire can be defined as a set of standardized questions, and these questions are often called items that aims at collecting information from the respondents. Therefore, the foundation of a questionnaire is a question. These items or these questions in a questionnaire are also referred to as questions of research. Do not confuse between questions of research and research questions. So we have said questions of research are the items or the questions in a questionnaire or any other instrument, whereas research questions are investigative questions that seeks to respond to the research problem. So, questions of research are aimed at answering the research questions. A questionnaire can be self-administered, where the respondent completes independently, or they can be read to them by the researcher. When the questions are read to the respondent by the researcher, this becomes more of a structured interview, and the instrument thus becomes an interview schedule. So an interview schedule is a questionnaire that is administered when the researcher is reading the questions to the respondent without probing. What are the factors that determine the success of a questionnaire? The first one is response rate. Response rate refers to how many questionnaires have been returned. It is the responsibility of the researcher to ensure that the instruments that he sent out to his or her respondents are returned. And they are not only returned, but the second factor is completion rate, meaning how many questionnaires have been fully completed. So ensure that your respondents have gone through and they have responded to each and every item in the questionnaire. And again, not just responding, but the validity of the responses. That is, how honest and accurate are the responses in the questionnaire. Because if the instruments are not returned, if they are not completed, and if they are not valid, then you will not make any valid results from your study, and therefore you cannot get solutions to the research problem that made you go to the field. What are the type of informations that a questionnaire seeks from the respondents? There are mainly four. The first one is demographic information. This refers to the background information of your respondents, and it should be based on the variables of the study. Note that you should only ask or seek for information that you need and is relevant to the study. So this background information that may include gender, marital status, educational background, age or age group, etc., must be related to the research problem. Do not tire your respondents by asking them too many information about their background, yet they are not relevant to your study. The second type of information that a questionnaire seeks is knowledge or information questions. These are questions that seeks to find out the respondent's knowledge of an area of concern. Again, this area of concern is your problem. For instance, if you asked your respondent what is the level of consumer awareness on the existence of counterfeit drugs, that is a knowledge question, and it must be related to the research problem. Number 3 is attitude items. These are the type of questions or items that solicit information about the respondent's liking or not liking about a concept. These types of questions are best captured in a Likert scale, and we shall be discussing Likert before we move to the second method of data collection. And finally, we have self-perception questions. These questions try to determine the respondent's evaluation of his or her behavior in relation to others. For instance, how do you rate your ability to identify counterfeit drugs? So that is not a knowledge question, but it is a self-perception question. So when you are constructing a questionnaire, ensure that your questionnaire seeks to collect the 4 types of information from your respondents. How do we design our questionnaires? A questionnaire can be constructed with closed-ended questions or with open questions. That is why we talk about closed-ended questionnaires and open-ended questionnaires. A closed-ended questionnaire consists of prepared list of concrete questions and a choice of possible answers in which the respondents select an appropriate response. This method may introduce bias where respondents are forced to choose from the alternatives given by the researcher. These questions that are closed-ended do not allow respondents to express their opinions. So the researcher constructs a closed-ended question, and the respondent is supposed to select from the possible choices that are given. For instance, how would you rate the customer service of your bank? So you have been given the option of selecting very good or poor. In that case, you have no opportunity of expressing your opinion. To make this question more appealing to the respondent, you may give the option of others so that the respondent, if they cannot select from the 3, can also have an opportunity to input a 4th rating. The open-ended question is where the respondent is free to express their thoughts freely. For instance, what recommendations would you give to improve online learning? This is an open-ended question where the respondent is free to express his or her thoughts about how online learning can be improved. Now, what are the do's and don'ts of asking questions in social science research? We have general rules of the thumb and very specific rules. So we shall start with the general rules, which are about 3. The first one is, what are the research questions? Remember, the questionnaire that you are developing must be geared towards answering the research question. This ensures that you will not tire your respondents with irrelevant questions. So always be guided by the research questions and the conceptual framework that defined the indicators of the variables of your study. Do not ask questions that are outside the research questions and the conceptual framework. The other general rule is, what exactly do you want to know? From the question that you are posing to your respondent, what type of information do you require? For instance, if you asked your respondent, do you have a car? This question is quite ambiguous. The respondent will be wondering, do you mean personal car or family car or an organizational car or what? And when your respondent is confused, then it means you will not get the type of data that you require. And finally, how would you answer it? Always ask yourself the question that you have put in your questionnaire before posing it to your respondent. This way, it will clarify to you whether the question is clear or not. So like that question of, do you have a car? If you asked yourself that question, you will realize that the question is not clear and you need to make it very specific. Now, what are the specific rules that you need to remember when designing questions in a questionnaire? The first one is, keep it simple in terms of the language and the interpretation of the question from your respondent. For instance, instead of asking your respondents to describe their place of residence, you could easily ask them the type of housing that they live in. That simple language is quite understood by majority of the people. In addition, ensure that the meaning or the interpretation of the question is the same for you and also your respondents. For instance, asking them, what is your salary scale? Now this again is not clear because it is not clear whether you need the gross or the net salary. Number 2, avoid double-barreled items. These are items that calls for 2 responses in the same question. For instance, statistics and research methods are 2 units that are abstract. So when a respondent ticks yes, how would you analyze that question? Is it statistics that is abstract? Is it research methods that is abstract? Or is it both? Or even if they were to tick no, what is the interpretation of that question? So that is a double-barreled question. Even in the next one, how satisfied are you with your university's management style and work ethics? So you have 2 variables, management style and work ethics. Number 3, use neutral or unbiased language that will not be offensive and will not make your respondents uncomfortable. For instance, asking people to indicate their race or ethnicity, especially when environment is very polarized, may not result in very honest responses. Number 4, minimize the use of negative wordings. Negative words are the words that indicate the opposite of what was otherwise described. Questionnaire items should avoid asking the respondents what they should not do because it can confuse the respondents. For instance, do you think the university should not increase the fees? A no answer would mean the university should increase, or it can also mean that the university should not increase fees. So the responses that you need or you get from such a question, or even the second one, would you rather not use lecture as a teaching method? In these two examples, a yes-no response does not give you specific and clear meaning of how you go about analyzing this question. Number 5, avoid the response set pitfall. This is where respondents are able to identify a pattern in the items that you have constructed. And once they do, they are likely to respond to all questions in the same way. For instance, look at the 3 questions. I enjoy learning research methods. Research method unit makes me happy. I look forward to the research methods class. Now, you can see the pattern that has been formed. So if the respondent identified or responded as strongly agree in the first one, chances are they will go on ticking strongly agree in all the items because they in their mind, they have already formed a pattern in terms of the responses that you require. To avoid this response set syndrome, mix the question so that a pattern is not created. So you may still have the 3 questions in your instrument, but they have been staggered across the whole questionnaire. Number 6, use rating scales consistently. If it is possible, rating scales should be consistent across the whole instrument. This means that there should be a pattern of response that is consistent. For instance, avoid a question requiring the respondents to mark very high, high or low, followed by another one that requires them to respond very satisfied, satisfied and not satisfied. If it is possible, let all the questions have the same rating scales. Number 7, the length of the questionnaire. There is no rule on the number of questions that a questionnaire should have. However, make it brief, clear and concise to address the variables of the study. Avoid duplicating questions, and this will come in handy when you are piloting the instruments so that you can determine whether you have ambiguous questions, irrelevant questions, duplicated questions that will tire the respondents and make them not complete your questionnaire. Number 8, avoid terms such as often and regularly. This is because they are very ambiguous and they mean very different things to different people. For instance, how often do you brush your teeth? When you ask them to tick very often, quite often, not very often, and not at all. Now, except not at all the others are very ambiguous. Does that mean very often is 2 times or 3 times or once? What is quite often? What is not very often? The best way to ask this question is to ask the actual frequency. How many times do you brush your teeth? Once, twice, thrice, or more than 3? Number 9, avoid very general questions. These are questions that are not specific. For instance, how satisfied are you with your job? Now, what is this satisfaction? Is it in terms of work conditions? Is it in terms of salary? Is it in terms of my relationship with my colleagues? Or what exactly is this satisfaction? Then finally, avoid questions that ask two questions in the same question. For instance, which new research book did you buy last semester? This question is assuming two things: that you were in class last semester and you must have bought a new research book. So such questions again will confuse your respondents. And with that, we have come to the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we have defined a questionnaire, discussed the factors that determine the success of a questionnaire, identified the type of information that a questionnaire should seek, explained the designs of constructing a questionnaire, and finally the rules that are followed when constructing a questionnaire. In the next lesson, we are going to demonstrate how we develop items in a questionnaire. Thank you for your time in this lesson. Feel free to ask any question regarding this lesson on the comment section. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel and also to like and share this video with your friends. See you in our next lesson as we demonstrate how to construct a questionnaire.